The night was cold over the kingdom of Valemore, and the great stone keep stood silent under a sky heavy with clouds. Inside the castle, torches burned low, and most of the halls were empty except for a few guards walking their rounds. It was the kind of night that felt ordinary, the kind that nobody remembers, until suddenly it becomes a night no one can forget. Elira had come to the castle earlier that evening, carrying baskets of dried herbs and small jars of medicine for the kitchen staff. She was a healer from a small village at the edge of the forest, known among hunters and farmers for her steady hands and her knowledge of plants that could stop bleeding, calm fevers, and ease pain. She had never expected to stay past sunset. She had only meant to deliver her goods and return home before the roads grew dark. But then the screaming started. It came from the upper floors of the keep, sharp and full of fear, and within moments the whole castle seemed to wake at once. Guards ran past her, their boots echoing against the stone floors. Servants rushed from room to room, their faces pale. Elira pressed herself against the wall, unsure of what was happening, until a young maid grabbed her arm. "The prince," the maid said, breathless. "Young Kiran, something is wrong with him. He is not breathing right." Elira did not know who Kiran was at first, not fully, though she had heard whispers of the Alpha King's young son, a boy barely 7 years old, quiet and gentle despite being born into a house of wolves and warriors. She followed the maid without thinking, her healer's instinct taking over, before her fear could catch up with her feet. When she reached the boy's chamber, the sight before her nearly stopped her heart. Kiran lay on his bed, his small body trembling, his lips pale, his breathing shallow and uneven. Sweat covered his forehead, and his eyes rolled back, as though he were fighting something inside himself that no one else could see. Around him stood several guards and servants, all frozen, all helpless, because the 2 court healers who usually cared for the royal family were away at a healer's summit in the next province and would not return for 2 more days. And standing at the foot of the bed, silent and still as stone, was the Alpha King himself. Elira had heard stories about King Draven Ashwood. They said he was strong enough to bring down a mountain wolf with his bare hands, strict enough to make his own warriors tremble, and cold enough that few dared speak to him without being spoken to first. But the man she saw now did not look like the fearsome king from the stories. He looked like a father watching his child slip away, and there was nothing more frightening in his eyes than helplessness. "Who is this?" Draven asked sharply when he noticed Elira standing in the doorway. His voice was rough, but beneath the roughness, she heard something close to desperation. "She is a healer, my lord," a guard answered quickly. "From the village. She was here delivering herbs when the prince fell ill." Draven's gaze moved to Elira, studying her with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she did not look away. She had seen sickness before, and she knew that fear, even a king's fear, would not help the boy on that bed. "I can try to help him," Elira said, "but I need to know what happened before he fell ill. Did he eat something? Was he outside? Please, every detail matters." For a moment, Draven said nothing, as though deciding whether to trust a stranger with his son's life. Then he spoke, his words tight and controlled, as if holding back something much larger inside him. He ate from a plate meant for the family dinner. Meat from the kitchens. Nothing seemed wrong with it. Elira moved closer to the bed, without waiting for permission, her hands already reaching for the boy's wrist to check his pulse. It was fast and weak, fluttering like a bird trapped in a cage. She leaned down and smelled his breath, then examined his lips and the color beneath his fingernails. Her heart sank as she recognized the signs. "This is poison," she said quietly. "Wolfsbane, I think, mixed with something else. Something that slows the body and stops the muscles from working the way they should." A heavy silence fell over the room. Draven's jaw tightened, and his eyes darkened with a fury that seemed ready to break through his controlled expression at any moment. But he did not shout. He did not demand answers about who had done this. Instead, he asked only one question, and his voice cracked slightly as he said it. "Can you save him?" Elira looked at the boy, so small and fragile against the large bed, and then looked back at the king. She did not know if she could save him. She had treated poisoned hunters before, men bitten by snakes or wounded by traps laced with dangerous herbs, but never a child, and never wolfsbane mixed with something unknown. "I will try everything I know," she said. "But I need supplies from my basket, and I need hot water, clean cloths, and someone to help me hold him still if he begins to shake." Draven nodded once, then turned to the guards and ordered them to bring whatever she asked for, his voice suddenly filled with command again, though his eyes never left his son. The next hours passed in a blur of urgent work. Elira ground bloodroot into a thick paste and spread it over the boy's chest, hoping it would draw some of the poison toward the skin. She brewed a bitter tonic from herbs she carried in her basket, forcing small sips of it between the boy's lips, careful not to let him choke. She pressed warm cloths against his hands and feet, trying to keep his blood moving, trying to keep his small body fighting. Twice, Kiran's breathing grew so faint that Elira feared she had lost him. Both times, she pressed her palms against his chest and spoke softly to him, though she knew he could not hear her, telling him to stay, to keep breathing, to be brave just a little longer. Both times his breath returned, shallow but steady, and Elira allowed herself a moment of relief before continuing her work. Draven stayed by the bed the entire night. He did not leave, not even when his advisors came to the door asking about the search for whoever had poisoned the food. He waved them away with a single sharp word and returned his attention to his son and the stranger fighting to save him. At one point, deep in the night, when the boy's fever spiked and his small body began to shake, Elira asked Draven to help her hold him still so he would not hurt himself. The king knelt beside the bed without hesitation, his large hands gently but firmly holding his son's shoulders, his face close to the boy's ear, as he whispered words Elira could not fully hear, though she caught fragments of them. Words like "stay with me," and "I cannot lose you too." That was when Elira understood. This was not just a king protecting his heir. This was a father who had already lost someone he loved and was terrified of losing the last piece of that love he had left. "He is all I have," Draven said suddenly, breaking the silence between them as the shaking finally passed and the boy grew still again. His voice was quiet now, stripped of its usual command. "His mother died 3 years ago. Sickness, not poison, but sickness all the same. I could not save her. I have told myself since then that I would never again stand beside a bed and be unable to help." Elira did not know what to say, so she said nothing. She only continued her work, checking the boy's pulse, adjusting the cloths, watching for any sign of change. But something had shifted in the room, an understanding passing quietly between the healer and the king, neither of them needing to speak of it further. As the night wore on, Elira noticed something strange. Draven, despite his exhaustion, never once looked away from her hands as she worked. He watched every motion, every herb she used, every decision she made, as though trying to memorize it all, as though afraid that if he blinked, he might miss the moment that mattered most. Near the deepest part of the night, when even the guards outside had grown quiet, and the castle seemed to hold its breath, Kiran's body finally responded to the treatment. His shaking stopped completely. His breathing, which had been shallow and uneven for hours, slowly deepened and steadied. The color began to return to his lips, and when Elira pressed her fingers to his wrist again, his pulse beat stronger, steadier, more like the pulse of a sleeping child than a poisoned one. "He is stabilizing," Elira whispered, hardly daring to believe her own words. "The poison is losing its hold. If he continues like this, he should wake by morning." Draven closed his eyes for a long moment, and when he opened them again, Elira saw something she had not expected to see on the face of the Alpha King. Tears, unshed but clearly present, shining in the torchlight. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice rough with emotion he seemed unwilling to fully release. "I will not forget this." As the first pale light of dawn began to creep through the tall windows of the chamber, Kiran stirred. His eyes fluttered open, weak but clear, and he looked around the room in confusion before his gaze settled on his father's face. Draven leaned forward immediately, gently brushing the boy's hair back from his forehead. "Father," Kiran whispered, his voice hoarse but alive. "What happened?" "You were very sick," Draven said softly. "But you are safe now. You are safe." Elira stepped back from the bed, giving father and son a moment together, her body finally feeling the full weight of exhaustion from the long night. She sat down heavily in a chair near the window, watching the sunrise paint the sky in soft shades of gold and pink, and allowed herself to feel, for the first time in hours, that everything might truly be all right. Draven stayed with his son a while longer, speaking to him in low, comforting tones, making sure he drank water and rested calmly. When Kiran finally drifted into a peaceful, natural sleep, the king rose from the bedside and walked quietly out of the chamber, gesturing for Elira to follow him. In the hallway outside, away from the sleeping boy, Draven turned to face her fully, for the first time since the crisis had begun. The exhaustion on his face was clear, but so was something else, something steady and resolved. "You saved my son's life tonight," he said. "The court healers were not here when he needed them most. You were." "I only did what any healer would do," Elira replied, though the weight of the night still sat heavy in her chest. "Perhaps," Draven said, "but not every healer would have stayed calm through hours of fear, or made the right choices when there was no time to think. Not every healer would have earned my trust in a single night." Elira did not know how to respond to that, so she simply nodded, too tired for many words. Draven studied her for a long moment, as though weighing something important in his mind, then gave a small nod of his own, as if some private decision had just been made. "Go and rest," he said. "You have earned it. A room will be prepared for you, and you will not need to walk home this morning." Elira thanked him quietly and allowed a servant to lead her to a small guest room, where she finally lay down and let sleep take her, her body and mind worn from the long night's battle. She did not see what happened next. She did not see Draven return to his study before the sun had fully risen, nor did she see him summon his most trusted steward in the quiet hours of early morning. She did not hear the low, firm words he spoke, words that would shape the following weeks in ways she could not yet imagine. "From this day forward, no healer other than the one who saved my son will treat any member of this family. Let it be done quietly, and let no one question it." The steward had hesitated only briefly before bowing and promising to carry out the order. He did not ask why, though he suspected the answer had something to do with trust, and perhaps something more that the king himself was not yet ready to name. By the time the sun had fully risen over Valemore, painting the castle walls in warm morning light, the secret decree had already been written, sealed, and placed among the king's private orders, hidden from the eyes of the court, and, for now, from Elira herself. She woke later that morning, unaware of what had been decided while she slept, unaware that her simple act of kindness and skill had changed the course of her life in ways she could not yet understand. All she knew, as she looked out the window at the golden morning light spreading over the kingdom, was that a small boy was alive who might not have been, and that somehow, in the middle of the worst night of fear, she had found a strange and quiet sense of purpose she had never expected to feel within these castle walls.